I uploaded 100 YouTube Shorts in 25 days. I wanted to see if I could brute force the algorithm by saturating the feed with a high frequency upload schedule. I was not looking for a viral hit or a lucky break. I wanted a data set that would tell me exactly how YouTube treats a creator who removes all the production fluff and focuses entirely on a single through line: frictionless living. The results were 27,162 views, 46 hours of watch time, and exactly 6 subscribers. That is a 0.02% conversion rate. It is a technical failure on all levels, but the data explains exactly why it happened. This was not a misunderstanding of the platform, it was an experiment that hit a very specific set of algorithmic walls. To understand why 27,000 views only resulted in 6 people hitting the subscribe button, you have to look at the relationship between content uniqueness, stop power, and the retention paradox. I have spent a lot of time trying to decipher how these algorithmic systems actually function, but I want to be clear that much of this comes down to my own interpretation. While I have cross-referenced these patterns against any documentation I could find, those sources are often outdated or contradict each other. The only part of this that is 100% factual is the raw data of my own analytics. The conclusions I have drawn from those numbers are my own best guesses, based on what I'm seeing. I'm sharing these patterns because they are compelling, but please look at your own logic and datasets before applying these takeaways to your own channel. The origin of this experiment began with 15 scripts I wrote myself. These were my actual takes on things I care about: cameras, gaming, and workflows. I used those 15 scripts to train an interrogation. I had ChatGPT ask me over 100 questions about my life, my tech preferences, my gaming habits, and my work. The goal was to find the DNA of my preferences. What we found was that in almost every category, from the way I work out to the way I choose a game, I'm obsessed with removing friction. I want systems that respect my agency and my time. I took that through line and turned it into 100 scripts. Script 1 focused on roguelike burnout, the friction of repeating content. Script 100 focused on the predictability of stickiness, how fast I can tell if a tool is going to respect my input. I kept the edits as simple as possible. I did not want the production to hide the data. I wanted to see if the idea alone could carry the reach. The experiment officially started on the 17th of Feb 2026. Even though the graph on YouTube shows the 16th, yet the videos listed clearly state that they were published on the 17th. Anyway, by day 2, the 18th of Feb, the experiment hit its absolute peak at 3,565 views in a single day. This day 2 spike is the discovery phase. When you upload 4 videos a day, the algorithm has to categorize you. It allocated seed impressions to my first few videos. Game padding and busy work and difficulty settings were the early outliers. Game padding hit 1,241 views because it tapped into a high friction topic that the gaming community already has a strong opinion on. But then the decay started. By the 10th of March, I was getting only 244 views a day. I was still uploading 4 videos a day, the scripts were still curated, the reach was dying. A major factor in this collapse was the lack of variety across the 100 videos. Although there were 100 scripts, there were only roughly 34 different concepts. This means I was effectively recycling the same semantic DNA 3 times over. YouTube's Shorts feed has a built-in duplicate and reuse filter, I've been told. Its job is to keep the feed from being spammed by similar content. By the time I was 50 videos in, the algorithm likely flagged the content as semantically redundant. Even though the scripts were technically unique, the visual setup, the auditory frequency of my voice, and the core frictionless message were a little too consistent. The system stopped scaling the reach because it saw the 51st video as a recycled hook of the first video. Brute force volume actually worked against me because it hit the saturation ceiling of the algorithm. Let us talk about the swipe rate. Total views 27,162, engaged views 8,725. That is a viewed rate of 32.1%. In the Shorts world, this is a death sentence. The viewed versus swiped away metric is the ultimate gatekeeper. Benchmarks from YouTube's own product team suggest that for a video to move out of the seed phase and into viral growth, you need a viewed rate of at least 60% to 70%. My experiment was at 30%. This means that for 7 out of 10 people, my hook, the first 1.5 seconds, did nothing to stop the physical movement of their thumb. I curated the scripts to be direct, but in doing so I removed the visual friction that stops the scroll. No aggressive text overlays beyond the topic, no high-intensity audio, just a person talking about a specific idea. The algorithm interpreted the 67.9% swipe rate as a sign that the content was average or niche, and it refused to push the videos to a broader audience because of that. Now, look at the people who did not swipe. The average percentage viewed across the 100 videos was 65.7%. For a 25-second video, 65.7% is not awful. On Shorts, 50% to 60% is considered a good baseline. 70% means people were watching the entire video once they committed to the first 2 seconds. I had one video on Demon's Souls that hit 123.56% retention. People were watching it, then it was looping, and they were watching part of it again. But the video only got 1,089 views. This proves that retention is a secondary filter. The algorithm does not care if 300 people watch your video twice, if 700 people swipe past it immediately. The swipe rate is the primary filter for scale. If you do not pass the stop power test, your retention metrics, no matter how high, will never be seen by enough people to matter. YouTube claims that every video is a fresh start, but the data from these 100 videos suggests otherwise. The algorithm appears to use a rolling average of your channel's recent performance to determine how many impressions to give to your next upload. By uploading 4 videos a day that 7 out of 10 people ignored, I was training the algorithm to expect low engagement from my channel. As the 25 days progressed, the initial impressions the system gave my video started to shrink. It was a data-driven correction. The algorithm had enough proof to know that my current frictionless production style was not a fit for the mass market Shorts feed. The most telling data point is the 6 subscribers. In a healthy tech or gaming niche, you expect 1 subscriber for every 500 to 1000 views. I was getting 1 for every 4527. The reason is that the content was identity neutral. Because I curated the scripts to be as efficient as possible, straight to the point, removing the fluff, I removed the very thing that makes people hit subscribe. Subscribers follow people, not just ideas. By making the videos utility focused, I gave the viewer the answer to their question without giving them a reason to care about, well, me. They got the value, they felt the agency of the take, and then they swiped away. They felt like they were reading a manual without any personality, which in fairness, was by design. When we categorized the 100 videos, the results aligned with this identity theory. Gaming grievances like game padding and Demon's Souls saw the highest views, averaging 450, and the highest engagement as well. Tech workflow, covering things like the Apple ecosystem and smartphone ergonomics, sat in the mid-range with an average of 180 views. Productivity logic, focusing on software confirmation prompts and agency, saw the lowest views, averaging just 95. The grievances performed best because they had the most internal friction. People respond to conflict. The productivity logic videos were the most frictionless for the viewer. They were simple and direct, and they were the most ignored. This experiment was a technical stress test, and the results are final. Volume is not a multiplier for reach. If your stop power is below the 60% benchmark, more uploads will only hurt your long-term algorithmic authority. Uniqueness is the only way to actually scale. Semantically similar throughline content eventually hits a duplication ceiling where the algorithm stops sampling new videos. Frictionless production is a trap. It is easier for the creator, but it makes the content too easy to ignore for the viewer. I successfully proved that frictionless content creates frictionless consumption. People watch, they might agree or not, and then they leave without a trace. If you want to build a channel, you do not need 100 videos. You need one video that makes 70% of the people stop their thumb. So again, the experiment is over. 27,162 views, 6 subscribers, 100 lessons on why being direct is the fastest way to become invisible. To really understand the subscriber conversion failure, we need to look at the psychological barrier between a viewer and a subscriber. In a long-form video, you have time to build authority. You have time to explain why your perspective matters. In a 25-second short, you only have time to deliver a payload. My payload was high-density logic. Script 98 is a perfect example. I talk about the need for clear stopping points to avoid burnout. It is a solid take, in my opinion. People might or might not agree with it. But when that take is delivered in a frictionless environment with no B-roll of what I'm talking about and no personal anecdote that anchor the opinion to my specific life, the viewer doesn't connect the value to the person. They treat the information like a utility. You don't subscribe to your water tap because it gives you water, you just expect the water to be there. By stripping the identity friction from the videos, I turned myself into a utility, and in this case, not even a good one. I was a 25-second burst of subjective logic that solved a minor curiosity in the viewer's brain, and once that curiosity was solved, I was no longer necessary. We also need to address the 34 concept limitation. In an ideal experiment, 100 videos would mean 100 distinct hooks. Because I was working with a specific interrogation DNA, I was repeating myself, not in words, but in semantic frequency. If the algorithm sees 4 videos in 24 hours that all deal with the ergonomics of tech or the annoyance of game padding, it starts to cluster them. Clustering seems to be a death sentence for reach on a small channel. It tells the system this creator only talks about this one narrow thing. Unless that one narrow thing is currently viral, the algorithm will cap your impressions to avoid overwhelming the feed with redundant content. By day 15, I wasn't just fighting the viewers, I was fighting the semantic filter. Every time I uploaded a new video about agency or control, the system saw it as a derivative of the previous 14 videos on the same topic. I wasn't expanding my reach, I was just competing with myself for the same 300 views. I want to be very clear about the stop power metrics. Many creators focus on retention because it is the number that looks the most impressive in the studio. Seeing 123% feels like you've won. But if you look at the viewed versus swiped away chart in YouTube Studio, that is where the real story is told. A 30% viewed rate means that my hook was failing over 2/3 of the time. In the Shorts environment, the hook isn't just the first sentence, it is the visual state of the video, the moment it appears. Because I chose a low friction style production, the visual state was static. It didn't have the visual friction required to interrupt the physical momentum of a person's thumb. If you look at the top 1% of Shorts creators, their viewed rate is rarely below 70%. They stop the scroll because they create an immediate high friction visual or auditory moment that demands attention. My experiment proved that information is not a substitute for attention. You cannot deliver value to someone who has already swiped past you. Finally, let us look at the rolling average data. Between the 2nd and 10th of March, the experiment saw a drop from 1,625 daily views to 244 daily views. That is an 85% drop in reach during a period where my upload frequency remained exactly the same. This is the algorithm's memory, as I'd call it. It isn't just judging the current video, it is judging the current video against the performance of the last 10 videos. Because the stop power across the experiment was consistently low, the system reached a point of confidence. It became confident that my content would result in a 70% swipe rate. To protect the user experience of the Shorts feed, it simply stopped showing my videos to new people. This is the brute force penalty, I suppose. If you upload bad content once a week, the damage is minimal. If you upload content with a 70% swipe rate 4 times a day, you are aggressively training the algorithm to ignore you. You are giving the system a massive dataset that proves you are not a fit for the general audience. The experiment didn't just fail to grow the channel, it successfully mapped the boundaries of algorithmic reach for my channel. It proved that in 2026, volume is not a strategy. It is a liability if it isn't paired with high friction stop power. I'm interested to hear about your experiences with content experimentation and the specific results you have seen on your own channels. If you would like to help my standing in the algorithm, considering that I probably destroyed any sort of standing I might have had, but if you do not feel like writing much, you can just spam the good old potato emoji in the comments. I would hope that it nudges the system to categorize the engagement as a sign of goodwill or something. In any case, thank you for watching and see you next time. Bye bye.